Fishing trips anywhere, anytime. FishingBooker.com.
Midway USA brand product designers have one straightforward goal: develop high-quality, technically sound products and deliver them to customers at reasonable prices. If you are immersed in the shooting sports industry and pay close attention to every single detail, you know our products are built right and stand up to everyday use. Who has shooting mats and range bag systems to hunting clothing and just about everything for the outdoors? Log on and shop 24/7 with super fast shipping. MidwayUSA.com.
At Midway USA, we put customers first. The Nitro Express shipping system is icing on the cake. It was a big investment of time and money to take super fast, low-cost shipping to a whole new level. The Nitro Express helps ensure same-day shipping and low shipping costs. We hope you enjoy the Nitro Express. We built it just for you. For just about everything for the outdoors, go to MidwayUSA.com.
I'm Larry Potterfield with Midway USA. Thanks for your business.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of CastingAcross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. Episode 337. The sun is shining. Spring has sprung. The fish are ready to feed. So, of course, we're talking about nymphs. Why are we talking about nymphs? We're talking about nymphs because this is what fish eat most of the time. There are only a few trout out there that concern themselves their entire diet with rising up to the surface to pursue mayflies. And ironically, as I say that, I have my door open to my office to the outside, and a size 14 kind of rusty colored mayfly came in and landed on my laptop. I'm looking right at it. So maybe there are more fish. Maybe that's what this little mayfly is telling me, that there are more fish that are predisposed to feed on dry flies more often than not. But what this little insect probably also knows is that when he or she was nothing but a nymph, it was very appetizing to the fish that were watching it bounce along the bottom of the creek. And that's because fish eat nymphal insects more than big, meaty streamers and more than dry flies. And this is true of big fish, and this is true of little fish. This is true of browns, rainbows, and brook trout. And again, as I alluded to before, there may be a fish that, because of its size or because of its behavior, does pattern in on dry flies or on streamers or mice or frogs or whatever it may be. But nymphs, they rule the world when it comes to numbers of fish. And so you had better figure out how to catch fish on them. Now, does that mean you need to go out and buy that 13.5-foot 2-weight and the monofilament spooled up on that reel that you throw a counterweight on? No. That's not what you need to do. Now, nothing wrong with Euro nymphing. I actually just picked up a brand new reel for my Euro nymphing setup and a brand new line for my Euro nymphing setup. And I'm excited to try it out here in a couple of weeks when I go fishing in Pennsylvania on a stream that I think it will perform really well on. But just because that is an option doesn't mean that you need to go do it. I think that's one of the things that we need to just remember. There was a while there where everybody was saying you need to up your gear game to throw these big articulated streamers to catch the biggest of fish, and that's kind of died away. And then, we're in this real kind of appropriate that we are giving nymphing an emphasis, but we're still maybe putting too much of a premium on using Euro nymphing gear, not really articulating the fact that we can use the same techniques and tactics and even more traditional nymphing techniques and tactics and do very, very well. And so that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about 3 things you can do with your normal gear to maybe move your nymphing game ahead a few steps. Now, I want to be very clear. If you are an expert nymphing angler or you have really dialed in your Euro nymphing, then the steps I'm talking about today aren't going to really move the needle for you a whole bunch, I think. These are steps to take if you want to increase your confidence and if you want to increase your skill level in using traditional gear for nymphing. These things can translate into using Euro nymphing gear and Euro nymphing techniques, but I would say that there's probably some better resources out there, things I've talked about elsewhere in Casting Across, and certainly there are some just spectacular things both online in articles and videos, and then books that go through Euro nymphing as a tactic. And so join me and this little rusty mayfly watching me record as we talk about some things you can do to improve your nymphing game. Here's the first one. So say you have that 8.5-foot 5 weight, and you're fishing your regular stream, and you're fishing for trout, and there's nothing rising, and so you have to just relegate your time to using a nymph. So you tie on that beadhead hare's ear, and you're gonna catch a fish if you just stick with it with that beadhead hare's ear. And let's say it's like a size 12. So it's not teeny tiny, but it's also not the biggest nymph in the box. And because it has a bead head, it has some weight on it. The first thing that I think is really important is that in as much as having the right tippet, both in diameter and in length, to ensure a delicate and finesse presentation of a dry fly's natural drift, having the right diameter and length of tippet so that you have a good feel for that fly as it bounces along the bottom of the stream bed is equally important. So here it's not so much about disguising that tippet from that fly, but really the most important thing when it comes to tippet length and diameter, both for dry flies and for nymphs, streamers is not as big of a deal, but for dry flies and nymphs, is that you want a tippet that is going to allow that fly to move naturally. You do not want that tippet to influence what that fly is doing. So again, it's easy to visualize. If you have like a 3x tippet that you've somehow found a way to cram through the eye of a size 16 blue wing olive, and it is going over either let's just say really glassy water, then the small currents in that really glassy water are going to pull that leader and tippet along at a greater velocity than that dry fly. And they're going to interfere with the natural drift of that insect. Now, underwater, you're going to have the same thing happen, but for the purposes of our discussion today, what will happen is that you will lose sensitivity on that bug. You will lose sensitivity on that, what did I say, size 12 or 10 beadhead hare's ear as it's bouncing along the bottom. So try to find, and again, I don't have a chart in front of me. I generally just use by feel. I like to use 4x and 5x. Now, if it's really, really fast water and it's a really, really big nymph, then you can jump up to 3x. If it is incredibly skinny water or crystal clear water, I like to use 6x. I do a lot of 6x nymphing on spring creeks when I'm throwing crest bugs and when I'm throwing into little soft tackles that I'm dead drifting. Reason being is that I want those things to have the most natural dead drift possible. But when we're come to weighted nymphs that we are bouncing along the bottom, having that lighter diameter tippet, let's just say 4x is a nice just assumption, and having a length of it that's maybe 3 or 4 feet long, not quite a full wingspan for a normal sized person, but close to that, is going to allow that nymph to sink down. It's that monofilament is not going to cause it to hang up in the water column too much. And so once you've got that tied on, cast not super far in front of you. Not super far in front of you. I think one of these great mistakes that we have is that we have to cast really far away. And I think that's why a lot of people are so intimidated by nymphing, is because whereas you can visually cue in on what your fly is doing when it is a dry fly going across the surface, be it 30 or 50 feet away from you, that nymph is completely out of sight. And so what do we usually do? We throw on a big strike indicator. We'll talk about strike indicators later, but you throw on a big strike indicator and you bomb that thing out there, and now all you're doing is watching that bobber float. So the problem, well, that can work. Let's be very, very clear. That can work. But you're not really having a great connection between you, your rod tip, and your fly. And so you're going to miss a lot of fish. The sensitivity of a fish's mouth is going to trump everything between you and it in that situation where you've cast a giant thingamabobber out 40 feet and you're just watching it. Okay, you are going to catch fish that way, but you're going to miss a lot of fish also. So anyway, bringing it back in close, look at a lot of Euro nymphers. Now, given their rod is about 3 feet longer, generally speaking, than that 8.5 foot 5 weight that you're using, but the fish that they're catching are in a relatively close proximity to them. And the same is true if you're fishing with traditional gear, normal line, making a cast, and you are fishing with that weighted nymph that is simply suspended from your rod tip down from some line and some leader and some tippet out of your guides into that fly bouncing along the bottom. Keeping that fly close to you for a while, just focus on what does it feel like? What does it feel like when you can feel that fly ticking the bottom? What is the sensation and how does it change as the water moves faster? So put yourself in a position where the water speed varies. Put yourself in a position where you know that there's a drop off. So are you fishing? Yes, you're fishing, but really what are you doing? You are trying to get a feel for the different sensations that come through that fly as it moves in the water. You can feel those things. Remember when you started fly fishing about how casting was difficult. And the more and more you cast, the more and more you picked up on how a rod loads and those small sensations that translate from tip down to midsection, down to butt section as that line picks up energy and it gains momentum that cue you in on when to make those alterations in your cast. In the same way, feeling that fly bounce around the bottom closer to you and then maybe further out and then maybe a little further out in different conditions is going to cue you in on those things to pay attention to. Now, for a lot of us, this just comes natural. The more you fish, the more you figure this out. But if nymphing is something that is a little intimidating to you, spending some time doing this in a very deliberate manner can really increase your ability to perceive what is happening and ultimately enjoy your fishing. So I guess this first piece is make sure that you have the right length and diameter of tippet and play with this. I would say be more liberal when you start off. So use a little bit lighter tippet than you think. I mean, you're not going to break off a ton of fish on if you're using 5X. For a lot of places that I fish here in the East Coast where it's heavily pressured, 5X is as small as I'll go with nymphs or dry flies. And I'm not losing fish because of that. I'm losing flies because of getting them hung up, but that's going to happen whether you have 5X or 4X or 3X if you're getting them stuck under rocks or in weeds on the bottom. And that's another thing too, got to get over losing flies. It's just going to happen. And pretty soon, as you're using this technique to get more feel and more and developing this understanding of the sensitivity of your fly as it moves through the water and along the bottom, you're going to say, well, that was a new sensation. And when you have those new sensations, pull up on the rod because you're either freeing your fly from a tangle or you are setting your hook into a fish or you're just popping that fly up to make another cast. So, take attention of the Euronympher and watch how much they set the hook. Do the same thing. So that's the first thing. All right. So practice close in and be comfortable fishing close in using those narrow diameters. All right. My mayfly is still hanging with me. Hopefully you are as well. The next one is use a larger streamer or a larger nymph that is unweighted as an indicator. Okay. Use a larger streamer or a larger nymph. Let me back up on that. A normal size streamer or a larger nymph as an indicator. So here I'm talking about nymphs and streamers that are probably in like the 4 or 6 size. So the streamer that I would think of first and foremost is a woolly bugger that you can see in the water column. Depending on where you're fishing and the conditions, that could be black, it could be olive, it could be cream colored. It could have a hot spot, a collar on it so that you can really ID it from visibly from a distance. Or when it comes to fly, something like a mop fly is a great fly to do this with. So here's what I would do. Generally speaking, say I have a 9-foot leader that is going down to 4X. I will then tie on that size, maybe 6 or 8 woolly bugger or that size 8 mop fly. And then from the bend of the hook, I will add maybe 3 feet of 4X or 5X tippet down to the nymph that I want to fish. So when you're fishing this way, it doesn't mean that you don't anticipate catching fish on the woolly bugger. You don't anticipate catching fish on the mop fly in the same way like you're fishing a dry dropper, which all this is effectively an analog for this, only you are fishing underneath the water, so you are having a little bit of a picture of what is happening beneath the surface of the water, which again is one more way to start to train your brain to pay attention to what is happening on the bottom of the river. Now, I know, as you probably do as well, that the surface of the water has one thing going on, directly below it, and that surface film is different. And then as you go down in that water column, the currents change significantly, and especially as you get down to the resistance that is generated from the bottom of the stream, whether it be mud or rocks or vegetation. All of those things are going to change the way that fly moves. So, but when you have that woolly bugger or that mop fly that is a foot down deep and you're watching it, it can give you indications of generally what things are doing, what that current is doing underwater. And it's also going to do exactly what that dry would do in a dry dropper, and what that fly would do the bobber would do if you were using a strike indicator. But here you have one more fly that can get bit, that can get eaten. And if nothing is hatching in a very real sense, then this is a higher percentage game than using a dry dropper, using that large streamer or that large nymph that you can visually key in on with that nymph below it. And so I fish this the exact same way that I fish a dry dropper. I'll cast it out and I will watch that streamer. And if it really starts to sink too much, then I'll give it a little lift with my rod tip to keep it, where I think it should be in the water column. So if I'm fishing maybe 3 feet of water, I've got that bigger nymph on there, and then I've got 3 feet of tippet behind it. I try to keep it at like 18 inches, and then I assume, okay, that means that small nymph, that trailing fly, is bouncing along, maybe on the bottom or in that first foot above the bottom of the creek. And I will keep moving my rod tip ever so slightly, not necessarily retrieving it, but just giving little gentle jerks and motions to keep that larger nymph or that streamer where I want it to be, in that foot to 18 inches below the surface. And you'll get strikes on that rise. I mean, that's if you fish long enough, you know that you catch a lot of fish on nymphs as you start to return that fly up to make that casting position. Because although nymphs do dead drift quite a bit, fish will key on a bug that has a little bit of motion as it rises up in the water column, because there are times and places where that happens, either because of the motion that nymph can impart on itself, or because as you watch stuff move along the bottom of the stream, it doesn't follow the contours of the stream perfectly. There's times where there are currents that push bugs up off the bottom. And so although it might spook the heck out of a fish, it also might entice it to strike. And so just be ready for that, both with that lead fly you're using as an indicator, as well as that fly that's trailing off the back of it. All right. So 2 of the 3 tips I've covered. The first one being fish close to you, fish with the right indicator, or excuse me, the right indicator. I'm getting ahead of myself. Fish close to you and fish with the right tippet diameter. Secondly, fish using a dropper rig where you can visually key in on what is happening with that lead fly, make it a larger fly, a fly that you can see a little bit easier. And then thirdly, this is the one that personally, this is what I did to really make myself, I think, a decent nymph fisher. And that was use the smallest indicator possible. Okay. Use the smallest indicator possible. And the best tool for this, although I like some of the, I love the tiniest Oros bobbers that they make, and I think those have become one of my favorite indicators that's out there. The best ones, in my opinion, even above like the little bits of foam and the New Zealand indicators, I think those are all great. But what I like to do for this technique is use Pulsa or sticky foam indicators. Okay. So these are disposable. So if you have great, problems with that, then I guess you're not going to want to do it. But Pulsa indicators are those little sticky ovals that you stick together, and they, or figure eights. And then now you have a strike indicator that kind of goes in one spot. The lovely thing about these is that they are very, very light. They do not inhibit your cast significantly, and you can alter them. So I always carry a sharp piece of scissors. How about a sharp pair of scissors in my pack, and I'm able to change my flies up on the fly. I'm able to fix all sorts of things. I'm able to, if I'm tying larger knots, bigger blood knots, I can cut with better precision than I can with a pair of nippers. But anyway, I take those scissors and I snip that pulsa into half or into thirds. And now you have this tiny little kind of, head of a pin sized strike indicator. And if you can visually key in on that, then you have now something that is going to do a lot when it gets taken by a fish or when it's hitting the bottom. And so now you're still using a strike indicator to key in on where your fly is, and secondly, on what's happening with it. But what I like about these is that it really does more to give you a visual point of reference to say, all right, there's where this tiny little strike indicator is. My fly is at a certain point behind it. And I do the same thing that I do with that first tip that I gave with strike indicators, where when I put a strike indicator on, whether I'm fishing in a new stream, the current is doing something funky, I'm using a different type of strike indicator, I'm not sure how this nymph is going to drift, I'll put my whole rig together and I will cast it upstream of myself, 10 or 12 feet. And then I will visually try to track that fly as it bounces along in front of my feet. And so I can think, all right, at 12 feet of drift, this is what this fly is doing. Do I need to change my tippet? Do I need to add weight? Do I need to change my strike indicator? So one more time, I cast directly upstream from myself and I do what I can to get a visual, key on that fly as it bounces in front of me at the first 2 or 3 feet in front of me. And I will use that to gauge, okay, I need to change up where my strike indicator is located. I need to maybe change up even if I'm using a weighted fly or an unweighted fly, make some sort of adjustment before I start casting out there, 20 or 30 feet in front of me and assuming what's going on. So once I know I have that dialed in, I'm using this teeny tiny little indicator. And when you're using something that small, you are not creating such a hinge in your presentation such that you lose all sensitivity. So that strike indicator, it really is not so much a strike indicator because hopefully with something that small, you're going to need to be feeling this sensitive take before you even register that thing has moved or even concurrent with it. But all it's serving to do is giving you a visual cue to where your fly is in the water. I use this exact same technique when I'm fishing really, really small midges far out. So there's some creeks where, in the dead of winter, there are midges rising everywhere, but based upon where I can access the creek or how wary the fish are, those fish are, they're 40 feet out. Well, I'm not going to be able to see a size 22 midge at 40 feet out. And if I'm using really long, light leaders and having to make long casts, then I want something that is going to give me a visual cue that my fly is, generally speaking, within a cone, somewhere 10 feet maybe away from where this tiny little indicator has landed. But I don't want to use something big and splashy because, the way that a lot of fish feed on midges, they are moving around in a certain range. And so I want to use something that's going to land very, very delicately and just give me a general direction saying, hey, your fly is, either 12 feet straight out or maybe 12 feet kind of quartering away from where this indicator is. So I like to do that with, again, the pulsas. Some other companies, I think Umpqua sells sheets of the stuff, just like it's a sticky foam, and you can actually cut your own sizes. I like the ease of peeling one pulsa off, cutting it in half, and then slapping it back onto the little sticker sheet it came on. So those are my 3 tips for maybe ways that you could improve your nymph confidence. And I get the approval of my mayfly. Maybe it's getting ready to lay its eggs or something like that. We'll see what it's planning on doing here in my office and if it becomes a permanent fixture. But given that they have a very short lifespan, I can't imagine that's going to be the case. Do you have something that you have done to improve your nymphing confidence? Did you just decide, you know what, forget it, I'm going to go out and spend $500 and get a new nymphing rod and reel and line and fill up a fly box with protagons? Then that's great. Good for you. Do you say, you know what, I'm just going to fish dry flies every day, all day? I think that's virtuous as well. But if you have something you'd like to share with me and the audience, do let me know. Matthew@castingacross.com. This week on Casting Across, 2 articles. The first one was called Post Tenebris Lux. And I think that pretty much every Easter Monday, as it is commonly called on Casting Across, I've written something that, as I've said before, reflects my values and what I think is most important. And what I think that the world needs to be aware of. And this year I've done something new, though, and that is I posted a link to the messages I delivered on Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday. So as I mentioned last week, and I've mentioned from time to time, I am a pastor of a confessionally Reformed Baptist church in southern New Hampshire, and I shared the messages. So if that's something you're interested in, then give it a listen. And you can listen to that either on the YouTube page over there on Casting Across, or you can listen to it in your favorite podcast catcher. The links for that are on that post. Post Tenebris Lux. It's Latin for after darkness light. Wednesday's article was called Video, a Key into the World of Fly Fishing Treasure. So this is by far the most expensive book I have shared on the Casting Across YouTube book review series, but it is a beautiful and wonderful book that is filled with just some of the most amazing and delightful fly fishing equipment and memorabilia that you can imagine, described by and collected by people who truly love and enjoy the sport and the heritage of it. So I really can't say enough about Fly Fishing Treasures. It is a truly great book. And so I'd encourage you to go check it out. But watch this video real quick over on YouTube or over on castingacross.com, and you yourself will probably be smitten with the idea of picking this book up. This week's recommendation on the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. It is kind of in line with Fly Fishing Treasures. It is fly fishing museums. So do you live somewhere where there's a fly fishing museum nearby? So I have an article that pops up if you Google fly fishing museums. After like the top 3 museums, my article comes up, which I always think that's cool. I'm happy to help people in that way. But Vermont, New York, Montana, North Carolina, Michigan, Maine, Pennsylvania are the museums I have listed there. There's probably others. If there are others that are truly fly fishing museums, let me know, Matthew@castingacross.com. I'll update that article. But go check one out. If you have plans to go fishing this summer, then add a fly fishing museum to your itinerary. And I think that you will truly enjoy it. But again, you can find my link to that article, Fly Fishing Museums, in this podcast's show notes over at castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
Explore historic waterways in 2025 with Scenic on the most inclusive cruise on Europe's rivers. Enjoy up to 5 dining experiences, spacious suites, and butler service. Be immersed in the culture with enriching free choice excursions and exclusive events. Scenic in a class of its own. Book now and save.